So I think it's not fair to assume that the charitable sector as such lacks transparency.
But you're not simply a charity in terms of the operation of your schools or your hospitals. You're actually trading in an industry, and you do get benefits because of the benefits that provides generally, and not just the Catholic schools, other schools as well. Schools are not a good example in terms of a charity.
Well, the charities, if you mean, Senator, by charity, welfare organisations, all of the welfare organisations the Catholic Church conducts that receive any dollar of government grants give the most detailed accounting back for those grants.
Yeah, I'm not talking about grants. I'm talking about tax-free status as a charity, and it just seems to me, if the Productivity Commission, I don't even think Treasury, and I'll ask the question this afternoon if they're listening in, if they can't tell us the cost to the public purse of charitable status, then we need to do something. The evidence we had from the New Zealand Charity Commission yesterday was that they can tell you exactly the cost to the public purse. They can do analysis on the benefits to the public of that charitable status. They can provide government with information and remove the information asymmetry that applies to this whole area of public expenditure. Why isn't that a good thing?
I'm not necessarily, Senator, have ever said it's not a good thing. I mean, there is nothing in our submission that is either for or against a charity commission in whichever model you establish it. But we have to be.
But you describe it as problematic.
No, I talked about the way in which the UK Commission was problematic on the public benefit test. I think there are two issues running here in this committee's discussions. One is the bill, which is about a particular type of public benefit test, and the issues relating to how that's drafted, about which we haven't said anything yet. But there is this broader question of how the charitable sector is regulated. And it's regulated very differently in different countries, and the academics will argue for a long time whether the New Zealand model is better than the UK model, is better than the Scotland model, is better than the Northern Ireland model, is better than the Irish model, the USA model, the Canada model. Treasury's submission has got all that detail in it. And that's a matter of considerable and worthwhile academic debate, and I'm quite neutral about which of those models.
An Australian model.
We could probably do the best of all of them, and that might be a very good thing. And I said the UK issue was problematic was that particular issue about the way they, I believe, have extended the meaning of public and created some of these other issues.
But there is an appeals process in the UK.
And I understand those charities that have been knocked back are in that process, and that's a matter still to be resolved.
And that appeals process goes to the extent of even a High Court judge who would take into account the legal precedents that have been in place for 400 years. That's my understanding. So there is a check and balance. I mean, I get the impression you and I don't want to, misrepresent you, but it seems to me you're saying this is a problem, and that's maybe a reason why we shouldn't go there, but you haven't outlined how that problem is dealt with.
I've illustrated what I think the problem is because of the way in which they've approached that particular understanding of
but you do concede that there's a process of appeal,
and that may or may not work itself out. Essentially, as I understand it, the UK test kept the common law test, but the Commission published its guidelines. The question then will be for someone to assess the extent to which those guidelines accurately reflect the common law test, and that was what I thought was problematic. As to whether or not we resolve that particular problem through this bill, I'm not sure that this bill actually directs itself to that particular question. And what checks and balances and appeals and so forth is a matter entirely for the design of the structure.
But I think as the committee is receiving evidence, there's been a number of propositions put forward. One is the need for consultation, which I think this process is starting that process, and it has to be a much more sophisticated and detailed consultation position. But what it is also saying is that advanced economies are moving away from the information asymmetry that applies to charities and are putting processes in place that make charities accountable, make them transparent, and ensure that they're acting in the public interest. And I don't think that's a problem, is it?
I don't have any difficulty with any of those propositions at all. I mean, that's, with due respect, I think that's just good government. But how you do it, and how you make it work, and how you make it work fairly, and how you minimise the administrative red tape burden that comes with that is, I think, very challenging, and that's why, you know, these other countries that have gone down this route most recently have not all gone the same way.
You see, the evidence from the UK Charities Commission was that all the arguments you've put forward here about problematic issues were put forward, I would assume, by the Catholic Church in the UK and other charities. But as the Charity Commission's come into play, it has operated effectively, and it's got an educational role, and it's got a support role, and it's got an advisory role, and all these roles are coalescing to where charities are now saying this is a good thing. Is that a possibility here, if we can get the best of all the...
It's certainly a possibility if we can get the best of all of it. And as I said, our submission is quite agnostic on the structure. I simply raised one particular problematic, which has, of course, led to some organisations that thought they provided public benefit to discover they weren't.
Nick?
You say agnostic on the structure?
Yes.
That's right, no, it's just...
It's a fairly general word, sir.
it is, but it's... No, I'm not quite, it's just a nice use of language.
Have you had discussions with the Catholic Church in the UK in relation to this?
I have, Senator.
And
I can explain that there is a group of my equivalents from England and Wales, which is a separate bishops' conference to Scotland, as you'll be aware, France, Germany, Switzerland, Canada, the United States, and we meet every couple of years and have established some relationship where we talk about these matters. Can I say this, that so much of the way we assess, and a particular organisation assesses its acceptance of the structure, has to do with its own background and culture. And in these meetings we have, some are aghast at the way in which other countries do things, just because that's not the custom that they're used to. So that's not a fair test, and some will sit more easily with certain burdens because that's what they've been accustomed to, which is different in other places. And I think we need to approach that question here in Australia with a very open mind. And you mentioned consultation. This sector has been consulted, I won't say to death because we're very much alive, but there has been an enormous number of inquiries and consultations and very serious academic work done on the way in which you regulate and structure the charitable sector.
Can I just, I'm happy to go to that point, but I want to come back to the point about your discussions with your...
I'm sorry.
With the Catholic Church in the UK, and basically what is their view about how this operates. You see, the Scientologists said yesterday it would destroy Scientology. Is there a view in the Catholic Church in the UK that this structure will destroy...
Certainly not. Certainly not. And the Catholic Church in the UK sits comfortably, but at some expense, because the level of reporting required, is a burden. Every dollar spent on that is a dollar that isn't spent on something else. So it comes at a cost, at an expense.
But isn't there an obligation that if you receive funding, support from government, that there is an obligation to report for accountability, and that you can't get away from some expense on that?
That is certainly true to a point, but you've got to remember the level of support of charities in the United Kingdom is very different here. Not all charities in Australia are deductible gift recipients. So again, you have to structure the level of reporting proportionate to the size of the organisation and the extent to which that impacts on the public purse. And that's where there is a difference between the United Kingdom and Australia.
Now, I assume you're not saying you don't want to be consulted on this, given your remarks about consulted to death. I'm sure you want to continue the consultation process.
Look, there comes a point, Senator, where a government, not probably before the next election, but whoever might be the government after the next election, has to make a decision either to do something or to stop saying that it's going to intend to do something.